Tough guys don't bird. You've heard the expression, tough guys don't bird. You haven't? Well, forget I mentioned it. The point is, I'm a pretty tough guy. And I bird. I'm a birder, a bird watcher. I watch birds. So there, I said it, and I'm glad. All my life, I've been interested in birds. A person can learn a lot from watching birds, especially if you're into sitting on power line wires or snatching insects out of the air with your beak. Only kidding about that. The truth is, I never watched a bird do anything that I personally found useful. I really don't know why I watch birds. It's kind of stupid if you think about it. Birding doesn't even make good conversation. I went down for lunch with the guys at Kelly's Bar and Grill and casually mentioned that I spotted a red shafted flicker in my backyard. Cripes, Ed Riley said. Not while I'm eating. Boy, I hope you stop that sucker, Bart Slade growled. Traipsing right through your backyard, was he? Probably one of them dopers. Dang dopers and preverts are taking over the world. What did this fellow look like? Short, tall? What? In case I catch him hanging around my place. Short, I said. Real short with a pointy nose. Actually, I just assumed the guys at Kelly's didn't know that I'm a birder. Even when I was a child, my interest in birds didn't receive much encouragement. Hey, Ma, guess what? I'd shout, running into the house. The baby robins are starting to fly from their nest. So, you expected they'd shinny down the tree trunk? Now go wash up for supper. The first actual encouragement my birding ever received was from my wife Bun. One birthday, she gave me a book titled Field Guide to the Birds of North America. I rushed out with my field guide and I tried to identify the first bird I saw, a little brown and gray chap. Hey, no problem, I said to myself. I'll just thumb through this book until I find a little brown and gray bird. The book was half filled with little brown and gray kinds of birds, dozens and dozens of them, each differing from its fellows only by a speck of black, yellow, or white, a fat beak or a thin beak, a perky tail, or a droopy tail. I immediately classified all these species as drab little birds and closed the book on them. Excluding drab little birds, I eventually got to know most of the species in our region of the country. Oh, occasionally I'd make an erroneous identification. Once, hiking with Bun along the river, I mistook an immature bald eagle for a spruce grouse. It was embarrassing. Who even expects a bald eagle to be immature? Anyway, I spotted this bird high up in a tree and made a snap identification of it for Bun, just to try to impress her. Spruce grouse, I said, pointing. At that moment, the bird had the unmigrated gall to glide down over the river and snatch up a snack for lunch. I didn't know grouse caught fish, Bun said. Well, sometimes they do, I explained. It's rare, though. Few people ever witness a grouse catching a fish with its talons. This is really a special experience, something I think that we should share just between the two of us and never tell anyone else about. I think I'll tell. I try not to get personally involved with the birds I watch. Who wants a meaningful relationship with a bird anyway? Well, what can it lead to? Trouble, that's what. One summer, a drab little bird almost drove me crazy. While the river was down during the winter, I had buried concrete blocks in the sand with chains attached to them. I then hooked the chains to a 2x4 boards so that when the water came back up, the free ends of the chains would float to the surface. I planned to use the chains to anchor a classy new dock I intended to build. The river rose in the spring, the boards floated, the chains up with the rising water, and everything was ready for me to carefully craft a fine new dock. First, however, I had to take care of some complicated wiring problems in the innards of my boat. One morning I looked out the window and I saw a drab little bird bobbing about on one of my chain boards. He bobbed his tail up and down about twice a second, and with each bob, he emitted a shrill sound, something like cheat. Although I had long before given up trying to identify drab little birds, I guess this fellow was a member of the dipper crowd, so named because of the constant dipping of the tail. Oh, he's so cute, Bun chirped. Look at the way that he dips up and down. It looks like he's doing deep knee bends. I went out to undertake the nerve-fraying task of rewiring my boat, parked a short distance from the dipper's board. Cheat, 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 went the little dipper. Cheat, 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 cheat. It is surprising how quickly continuous jeeting can erode someone's sanity. When I could stand it no longer, I climbed out of the boat, selected a good throwing stone, and hurled it in the general direction of the dipper. He flew off to a rocky point and he waited until I climbed back into the boat and immersed myself in its innards. Then he flew back to his board. Cheat, 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 cheat. Every morning the dipper would arrive at the board, no doubt carrying a sack lunch, and begin his endless exercising and jeeting. This bird was making a career out of driving me crazy. I started having nightmares in which he starred. I can't stand that dip any longer, I growled at Bun one morning. I had yelled at him, put curses on him, thrown rocks at him, and he still insists on driving me crazy. Now I'm going to have to take drastic measures. You don't mean? That's exactly what I do mean. I'm going to build the dock. Then he won't have his boards to stand on anymore. I threw the dock together in 2 days, working with furious energy that comes only from near madness. The results weren't pretty. Visitors who saw the finished dock often mistook it for a bridge that had been washed out in a flood, but they knew nothing about docks, or dippers either, for that matter. The dipper's board was now gone, and he with it. Glorious silence filled the land. I had worried that the dipper might turn the dock into his own private gym, but the deck was apparently too high off the water to suit him. Or perhaps he was afraid of the structure, as even some humans were. I miss the little bird, Bun said one morning after the dock was complete. Me too, I said. I really enjoyed watching him. He always seemed so cheerful. He made me happy too. Yeah, I said. What's for breakfast? Before we discuss the topic of what's for breakfast, Bun replied, I want you to promise that you'll do something for me. Old Harold Wizzle stopped by later in the morning and found me standing out in the river. What you building? Harold asked. A dipper board, I said crinkily. What does it look like? How come you building a dipper board? Well, if you must know, Harold, it was either this or learn how to cook. What's a dipper anyway? The dipper never returned to use his new board. I think you must have offended him, Bun said. Maybe, I said. I certainly hope so. My latest run-in with a bird occurred last winter. It was one of those nasty days full of wet and wind and overcast with gloom. As I waited sullenly at my forced stoplight in his many intersections, the faint notes of birdsong penetrated my consciousness. I glared in the direction of the disturbance. There, in a stubby tree planted by the street department, in its continuing effort to obstruct the view of converging drivers, a drab little bird clung precariously to a wind-whipped branch, singing its little heart out. I could not help but be moved by the sight. That little bird, wet, cold, and obviously miserable, had absolutely nothing to sing about, but still it sang. Surely there's some lesson to be learned from this, I said to myself, other than the fact that this bird is either a fool or a lunatic. Alas, I was distracted from my reverie when the trucker behind me attempted to implode my eardrums with a blast from its air horn. In response, I thrashed wildly about the interior of my small sedan, almost impaling myself on the stick shift, for I know the keen disappointment truckers feel if the blast from their air horn doesn't prompt some such energetic display from its victim. Retrieving my composure, along with my spectacles, which had handily hung up on the rearview mirror, I deduced the reason for the trucker's impatience with me. The signal light had switched from red to green during my pondering of the lunatic bird. Not to be outdone, the engine of my car decided to contribute to the occasion by expiring with a cough and a jerk, and then stubbornly refusing to be revived. The blurry trucker, as seen through my rearview mirror, appeared on the verge of a meltdown, or so I judged from the steam issuing from around the band of his size 8 cowboy hat. Obviously, he assumed my continued delay at the green light was for the sole purpose of irritating him, or even, heaven forbid, teaching him some manners. It is this sort of innocent misunderstanding that can lead to the inconvenience of taking your nutrients through a tube in your arm. I wondered if it would help matters if I walked back and told the trucker about how I'd been distracted by the little bird singing in the rain. He actually might get a kick out of it. Then again, probably not. Luckily, at that moment, my engine ignited and I spurted to safety beneath the amber glow of the caution light. While he waited for the next green light, perhaps the trucker too would hear the brave little nutty bird and thereby have his mood transformed to the wonderful serenity of being one with nature. But I wouldn't bet on it.